We have injury updates, Jameson Taillon's Yankees debut, and should you actually be adding Tyler Naquin? Let's talk about it next on Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. Welcome into FBT in 5, a podcast that gets you caught up fast on the fantasy news and advice that you need to know. Follow and stream us on Spotify and anywhere else podcasts are found. Today is Thursday, April 8th. I am Frank Stanfield, joined by Scott White. And let's start off with some injury optimism. Zac Gallen was scheduled to throw 80 pitches on Wednesday, and it seems like he is nearing his return, Scott. If you can buy him on the cheap, is that something you were looking to do?
Yeah, that's something I'm looking to do. He was basically a borderline ace before he got hurt, the stress fracture in his throwing arm. And, somebody who's off to a good start who I don't think has the same level of upside. I'm thinking like a Pablo Lopez, maybe somebody you could use to get him, a Kevin Gossman. I'd be fine with those. I think it's a really good sign that the Diamondbacks have already decided to move Caleb Smith to the bullpen. I think between that and the number of pitches Gallen was scheduled to throw, 80, he might be back the very next turn through the rotation.
Scott, would you trade Sandy Alcantara for Zac Gallen?
I actually would not. I just updated my pitcher rankings tonight. I moved Sandy Alcantara 2 spots ahead, which says a lot about how I feel about Alcantara and the strides he's made. But really, I trust Alcantara to go deep into games as consistently as I do Gallen. That's part of where it comes from. And then if he's doing that, I think he's less of a health risk moving forward. Stress fracture in the forearm, maybe that could happen again for Gallen. I think I would. It's close, but I think I would prefer to have Alcantara at this point.
Trevor Rosenthal, who was the presumed closer for the Oakland A's, might need thoracic outlet syndrome surgery. And with the Arizona Diamondbacks, we have 2 bullpen situations here. Chris Davinsky picked up the last save for the D-backs, and he was placed on the restricted list. So, Scott, between these 2 bullpens, Oakland and Arizona, what are you thinking with these 2?
Yeah, obviously that stinks for Rosenthal. We have a pretty good idea who would replace him if he is out for an extended period of time. Jake Diekman, who had a great year last year and seemed in line to be the closer before they signed Trevor Rosenthal. Remember, the Athletics signed Rosenthal pretty late. Diekman worked the 8th inning Wednesday with Lou Trevino working the 9th, but I still think Diekman would be the front runner now, and I think you want to go ahead and put in a bid for him. Diamondbacks is completely up in the air. I would kind of guess with Joakim Soria also being out, Stefan Crichton would get the next turn. He was who the Diamondbacks were turning to for saves down the stretch last season. I don't think he's a closer caliber reliever, but just the fact that they've tried him there before, that's probably where I'd be looking, but it wouldn't surprise me if somebody like Kevin Ginkel got a shot instead.
We have 2 starting pitchers who are dealing with their own injuries as well. Mike Soroka is working his way back from a torn Achilles, and now he has right shoulder discomfort. And James Paxton was placed on the IL dealing with a left forearm strain. Paxton just has not been able to stay healthy the past couple of seasons. Scott, what are you doing with these 2, Soroka and James Paxton?
Well, waiting to find out more for Paxton. We don't know the full story, the full timetable yet. It sounds like they're hopeful it's not a major injury, but still, anything that shuts down a pitcher, you're talking 4 to 6 weeks at best. Soroka, him being shut down for 2 weeks, he seemed like a guy who was on the verge of returning the next time through the rotation too. But now that his shoulder's not feeling right, at least 2 weeks of not pitching. I'm just hoping Soroka makes it back before the end of May at this point. If you have an IL spot, obviously you want to stash him in it. But if you don't, if you're talking about a bench spot in a shallower league especially, you may need to go ahead and free up that spot at a time of year where there are so many possibilities out there, so many avenues to pursue for upside.
Scott, I'm going to marry these last 2 together. Jameson Taillon has dealt with a ton of injuries himself, made his Yankee debut on Wednesday night, 4 2/3, 2 earned runs, 7 strikeouts to 0 walks, and Tyler Naquin has 4 home runs in the last 4 games for the Cincinnati Reds, one of the most viewed players on CBS Sports right now. What do you think of Taillon, and should we actually be adding Tyler Naquin?
Kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Because Taillon was universally drafted. But I was really encouraged by what we saw from him. Velocity was almost back to where we saw it for him in 2019 before having the Tommy John surgery. He didn't throw any sinkers. He He went with breaking balls and a four-seam fastball, which was the approach that benefited so many pitchers who left the Pirates. Tyler Glasnow, Garrett Cole, even somebody like Charlie Morton. So I think he's heading the right path. Tyler Naquin, I mean, he had so many opportunities to break through in a really thin Indians outfield and never could. He had some health problems along the way. It's nice to see him going on a home run binge now, but it's only because Jesse Winker's been out with a stomach issue, and I don't think the Reds are ready to move on from Winker. So I'd pass over Naquin for now.
For more extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to the Fantasy Baseball Today podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, your smart speakers, or anywhere else podcasts are found. And thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. If you enjoyed the pod, please leave a 5-star review on Apple. We'll be back again tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.